My name is Annalise. I work for Eats Park City as their education coordinator. Many of you may have been familiar with Eats already, but we are a nonprofit based out of Park City, Utah, where we focus to connect and grow our community through fresh and nutritious food. Through Eats, we host cooking and gardening classes to kids. We advocate for healthy school lunches, and we address food insecurity through our backpacks program. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. And now I will leave it to our panelists to introduce themselves as well.
Great, thanks, Annalise. Thank you, Eats. It's really great to be asked to come join and talk about holiday foods and thyroid health. My name is John Lawrence. I am a medical doctor who had many years of practicing traditional Western medicine, and over the last 5 years was part of a functional medicine clinic, which is who I'm going to introduce you to my clinic partner of years and dear friend, Reagan Archibald. So Reagan is the owner and founder of East West Health Clinic, with clinics here in Park City, Salt Lake, and elsewhere. You can go into. He is an unbelievable acupuncturist. I mean, Reagan, when he started out many years ago, could probably have worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and still had a 3-month waiting list. He was so popular, and he realized he needed to help more people. He is an unbelievable ambassador for wellness and health, an expert who I learn from every time we talk. His experience is amazing, and he constantly is looking for new ways to get to the root cause of illnesses, to find the most cutting edge way of helping people to help themselves with health and wellness. So I'm so excited to listen today and to talk with him about thyroid health, the foods you can use, how we can address stress. Reagan lectures around the world. He really is just, it's gonna be a gift. It's gonna be a really great show today. So Reagan Archibald.
Wow, thanks for the introduction, Dr. Lawrence, and really appreciate being on Eats. I mean, what a cool thing to talk about right now is the food that we're eating, because if you think about it, we're in the midst of the worst health crisis we've ever been in my lifetime. And I think anyone on this can't think of a time where we've been in more of a crisis mode. And so I think putting the right foods into our body is critical. And so today we've got a couple things we want to cover, and we want to answer your questions when it comes to thyroid health. But we're going to go through and talk about some of the foods that can really optimize the way that your body functions and your thyroid functions. We'll talk about some foods that diminish your thyroid function, some of the goitrogenic foods that you want to avoid. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. But yeah, maybe as we start, John, what would you, maybe we could talk about the thyroid and what it does and why it's important.
Yeah, let's go into that. And maybe Annalise can let us know, or Ann, you can let us know as questions come up, because we could go really deep into thyroid and be here for a few hours. So the thyroid is this gland, the gland up here in your neck. People know about the thyroid, maybe if they hear about people who have goiters. You know, we used to feel like, oh, they don't get enough iodine, so they have this big thing on their neck. And the thyroid produces hormones that are essential to almost every aspect of your body. So that's why it's one of the critical functions. And it feeds back and forth to there's the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus in your brain that say, hey, we're cold, we need to make more heat, or we need more energy. And so they'll kick down some hormone down to your thyroid and say, hey, make more thyroid hormone. That thyroid hormone goes and affects everything in your body. So when people think about having low thyroid, you might say, oh, that's right, you're feeling fatigued, depressed, not sleeping well, your digestion's not working, your libido is low. So it can affect every aspect. This is a critical hormone in your body. And at the same time, it can be affected by everything from stress, from foods, not having the right nutrients that it needs to convert the hormones, to create the hormones. If you have too much stress, it might say, hey, we don't have time to make that. We don't want to have a libido. We're being chased by a tiger or barbarians. This is not the time to get pregnant. So it is all this elegant system of how it feeds back and forth. And we'll go into that as we talk about why certain foods are important, why stress is important, and how that affects the thyroid.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I mean, Dr. Lawrence and I have worked together for years, and we look at the people who have hypothyroidism or an underactive thyroid. It's a large percentage of our population. If you look at some of the studies, they find that 40% of the population suffers from some type of underactive thyroid. Most of this population are women. And if we look at the female hormone profile when it comes to thyroid health, we find that the majority of them, over 90%, have some type of autoimmune component that is contributing to the thyroid hormone not functioning properly. Because John, if you think about it, when the thyroid function is optimal, what's a person going to feel like?
You're going to feel awesome. You're going to feel energized. You're going to be sleeping well. You're going to be thinking clearly. I think Reagan made a great point, just backing up for a second, just to understand the impact that the thyroid has. I mean, depending on the study you look at, it's actually the most commonly prescribed medication is thyroid hormone. I mean, some will go some other medications, but some studies show. So it's,
Right.
it's really prevalent. Some of that has to do with the changes in food in our society in the last decades, unfortunately, and stress, which we'll get into.
Stress is a big one. Yeah, and just if we look at foods, one of the contributing factors to a lot of the hypothyroid is, as we've done some deep dive into the research, is if you look at the foods that our parents ate, for example, or our grandparents, that food was a lot different than what we're consuming these days. Dr. Lawrence and I both grew up on farms. Mine was not quite as, it was more of a cattle ranch, but we did have a lot of crops of grain and alfalfa, and I used to move sprinkler pipes, and the planes would come and spray Roundup on the fields, and I'd get drenched in the Roundup. So I ended up getting high levels of glyphosate in my system. And that glyphosate is one of the things that we think contributed to a thyroid issue that I had in my 20s. And so, we see that time and time again, that our foods are being processed in a way that might not be safe and might not be healthy for us in the long run. And so I think part of the prevalence is, yes, the foods have changed, but the stress is also bigger. And Dr. Lawrence, how does stress influence the thyroid?
Yeah, well, let's, I'm gonna back up for 1 second and then dive back into that, because I just want to talk about maybe a little bit more of the thyroid that maybe I should have talked about. So when I talked about the thyroid itself, putting out thyroid hormone, what I want to differentiate, and this is something Reagan is great at, why we need to do testing, why anybody having thyroid issue needs to do some deep dive into testing. There's different aspects that can be affected by the thyroid. This will make more sense when we talk about stress and foods, because you can have your thyroid puts out a few different hormones, but an active form of thyroid hormone called T3 and an inactive form called T4. Now, the high majority of what your thyroid puts out is T4. That means it has to be activated. It has to be transformed into T3 for it to work. So one of the main issues is your thyroid working directly? But wait a second, what if your gut's not working? That's one of the main areas. Maybe 25 or 30% of your thyroid T4 converts to T3, the active form that gives you energy, in your gut. So if your gut's not healthy, well, you're not going to be, you might look like you've got low thyroid issues, but your thyroid itself might be fine. And we'll get into the autoimmune aspect. So anything that, let's say, affects your gut could therefore affect thyroid function. And we know that stress can affect your gut. So there's all these different feedback systems. And I'm going to do a deeper dive into stress in a second, and how it can affect it in direct ways and immediate ways that can affect you for days. Just one aspect of stress, one bad night's sleep could affect you for 5 days out, where your thyroid might not be functioning optimally. But I think sometimes it's interesting to hear about patient cases we've had. And there was a few cases we've had really high difficulty getting their autoimmune disease, their Hashimoto's, under control, just high fatigue, couldn't get off the couch, nausea for years, no matter what they ate. And we went deep and tried so many things until we realized they had a gut issue, something called SIBO, where their small, the bacteria in their gut was moving up into their small intestine. It caused so many problems. Once we got that under control, the thyroid issues fixed themselves. And all of a sudden the person had energy. Almost within like a few weeks it happened. Energy came back, nausea disappeared. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge relationship between all the different aspects of your gut. do you want to go right into stress, or should we focus on food for a little bit?
Yeah, let's, I think food is kind of interesting, but stress, even if you look at the HPA axis, so let's say somebody,
Right.
let's stick with that for just a minute, and then we'll get into food, because I know we're Park City Eats, and so I've got all these foods that I want to share that people can start eating and just binge on. Okay, maybe not that extreme, but
Yeah,
there's,
and especially 2020, we're talking, stress is out there for everybody. It's just part of what's going on. It's the holidays coming up, higher stress. So, and it's easy for us to say, well, just lower it. Don't be stressful, right? Just take, get rid of it that way. But it doesn't work that way. So yeah, Reagan, why don't you go into how stress, and I'll chime in on the different ways that stress affects us, our thyroid specifically.
Yeah, so one of the things that you have to look at is your thyroid, as Dr. Lawrence talked about, your thyroid produces kind of an inactive form of T4. 93% of what your thyroid is pumping out is T4, and it has to get broken down into T3. But one of the things that happens is that conversion takes place in the liver. And if your stress hormones become elevated, there's a hormone called cortisol that stops the conversion of T4 to T3. So if you ever wonder why you put on weight, I just had a patient that came in, and over the last 2 years, she's literally went from 150 to 195 pounds. And so she's just like beside herself because she's eating less, she's trying to exercise more, but her stress levels are sky high. And so part of the thing that happens is when your stress hormone comes up, converting the T4 into T3, that gets deactivated because the cortisol is your alpha hormone, and the cortisol is just saying, hey, we need to make sure that you run from the tiger, or you avoid, getting taken out by a train or a bus. And so, part of the thing we look at when it comes to stress is, well, everyone's going to have it, but it's when our body crosses that threshold where we have too much stress, then the thyroid becomes rendered ineffective. And there's this interesting axis called your Hpa axis, or your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. And essentially what happens is the brain is always looking for stress hormone, and that's the priority. So when there's stress hormones the priority, then all the other downstream hormones get put on the back seat of the bus. And so that's what we're seeing happening to these millions of people who have thyroid issues, is they don't realize it, but their thyroid issue is usually not independent. It's not like your thyroid's out of balance, and if you get a diagnosis that you've got hypothyroidism, and now you're on the Synthroid or whatever medication, it's usually not the source of the problem. The source of the problem goes down deeper into the cortisol hormone. And then you look at the gut, like leaky gut, like you'd mentioned earlier. And then you even go as far as like, oh, is there small intestine bacterial overgrowth? Are there infections? And that's where we really have to dive in and find out some of the root causes.
Right. And especially, Reagan, when you're talking about the cortisol, I think one thing that sticks out for me when I've looked back at a lot of patients who come in very frustrated, going, I've been diagnosed, let's say, with a thyroid issue, but I am eating well. I'm working out 3 hours a day. I'm barely eating, and I'm gaining weight. They're going, how can this be? How can I be working out 3 hours a day, barely eating and gaining weight? And it's cortisol. I mean, you can go off, like Reagan said, cortisol, the stress hormone, the fight or flight hormone, obviously keeps us alive, critically important. But when you deal with a chronic situation, you have it long-term, your body gets into this awful vicious cycle where the higher the cortisol levels, when it's there all the time, it just keeps your sugar levels high. And if we get into, again, it's going to go a little deeper into some hormone issues, this gets into insulin resistance, which also directly affects your thyroid, and also can be related to the foods and nutrition. So once you get into this cycle where cortisol is high all the time, you're stressed all the time, that means on a almost direct level to the thyroid, when you're stressed, if you have a big stressful event, it tells your body, you get these TNF alpha and IL-6 start telling your body, don't even produce thyroid. So, that's what I was saying, for 5 days, you're going to have a decreased amount of T3 and T4 being produced. But over the long term, cortisol is high. That basically has a lot of sugar. Your insulin is being pushed out saying, hey, put the glucose into the cells. We can't have sugar in our body high all the time. The cells can only take so much of that when it's happening all the time. They stop listening to insulin, but then your body starts putting out more and more insulin saying, hey, it's not listening. You're not listening. The receptors aren't paying attention. That's when you develop what's called insulin resistance, something you might have seen in the news. Once you get insulin resistance and the cycle's going on, it gets very hard to reverse. And so you keep stressing your body by working out harder. You keep not eating enough, which can stress your body. So the more stress just keeps adding to the cycle that basically says gain weight. And this leads into kind of keeping hold of estrogen in your body. It leads to not producing the other healthy hormones like testosterone and things that might give you more energy and focus. And it leads, I mean, on a deeper level, it goes all the way into what's been diagnosed as calling a metabolic syndrome, which they're saying that alone, the amount of people that are developing this high cortisol, insulin resistance, weight gain, high cholesterol, which is affecting so many people, they're saying metabolic syndrome alone could bankrupt the entire health system. So if we start eating healthier and handling our stress, all this can reverse, but we got to be patient. We got to be disciplined. So,
yeah, well said. I mean, if you think about some of the symptoms, you know, if you have hair falling out, if you're gaining weight, but you're still exercising, you're eating great, if you're tired all the time, cold hands, cold feet, outer third of your eyebrows thinning, if you feel achy a lot, if you have lack of motivation, depression, you know, think about the amount of antidepressants that are written in the state of Utah that actually are hypothyroid. You know, the doctors aren't running the right tests. And so, you know, Dr. Lawrence wrote a great book called Doctored. And I love that. Your book is phenomenal. So everyone needs to get a copy of that. But were you taught any of this information in medical school?
well, I went to medical school like 100 years ago. So they really did. And at the time, now this is going back 20 years, things have changed. There's a lot of advances. Medical school is now teaching nutrition, teaching how it can trigger autoimmune and that, you know, the importance of actually doing a deeper dive into the thyroid. But 20 years ago, they thought if you're diagnosed with, or your patient was diagnosed with a thyroid disorder, it was awesome because then you can put them on thyroid hormone and they're going to thank you the next day. They're going to feel great. Things have gotten a little bit deeper. There's a much deeper dive that we need to go into to understand where the actual problems are coming from. And so we need, you know, medicine had to understand it more. So luckily they are teaching it now, and we're getting, you know, medicine itself is becoming, you know, is understanding how the, you know, it's not just a simple fix one hormone, they all get better. You know, you can't address one hormone without all of them being affected. And we can't address the hormones without looking at your body, where are the issues actually coming from? And that's what we're here for today, to talk about some of those issues with nutrition and food.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think it's interesting. It's always an evolution and we're learning more and more. And now we've been using novel peptide structures to actually wake up the thyroid. So instead of putting thyroid hormone in the body, you retrain the body on how to communicate. And we're seeing really radical transformations there with our patients. So, you know, part of it is get the right tests, right? The corrective tests are kind of the key. So some type of functional blood chemistry panel, that's usually where we want to start. That's our foundation. And then the other tests that we've talked about today, cortisol. So that's a salivary test. And we look at your cortisol levels throughout the course of 24 hours. And then we look at a stool profile. I think that's everyone's favorite, wouldn't you say, John? People just love.
The glory test. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, you know, who doesn't want to, you know, get a stool sample or two? So
poop in the box.
Poop in the box. It's really important. So let's kind of shift gears. So hopefully everyone understands, like, your thyroid is a big deal, but it's never just the singular cause. If you want to correct it, first of all, understand what the problems and complications that relate to the thyroid are. And then the secondary thing we do is, well, how do we treat it? Well, there's novel peptides. There's things you can do without just throwing hormones at your body. But what are some of those foods? And so food's a critical component because, I mean, Dr. Lawrence, what happens if someone's got hypothyroidism and they're fasting all the time, for example?
Well, it's stressing their body. So that's going to cause some issues. Reagan sometimes asks me questions. He's leading me thinking I know what he's thinking, but I'm not always, depending on the food you need. And this is why the testing can be important, because one of the, the first things we think about thyroid, well, in order for the thyroid to create thyroid hormone, you need iodine. So you got to make sure you're getting the right nutrients to actually produce it. Now, You also need zinc, you need selenium. We'll talk about where all these things, foods that have them come from that allow you to convert. First, you have to make the hormone, then you have to be able to convert it from the inactive form to the active form. In order for those foods to get into you, they actually have to be able to go through the gut lining. So again, we go back to that healthy gut, and there's foods that will help with a healthy gut. There's foods you need to avoid to make sure you don't have an unhealthy gut. And when we go back to that, again, I talk about that vicious cycle, but when we look at stress or the immune system, if you're a stressor of inflammation, that leads to the leaky gut. If you have leaky gut, that can lead to a low thyroid. If you have low thyroid, that can also affect you having a healthy gut. That can affect the gap junctions, which will then allow you to trigger an autoimmune disease, which then affects your thyroid. So you can see that I can go in a circle for an hour. You'll have to shut me up. So those are, when you, but what were you referring to on the fasting? You're probably thinking of something specific, and I'm.
No, that's it. So, it puts stress on your body. And then anytime there's stress, because you love fasting, I love fasting. I think it's a great practice, but, we think about doing things like, let's cut calories to lose weight, or I'm going to go on a 5-day fast and just cleanse my body because I'm putting on weight. But if you have a thyroid issue, your metabolism's already broke, and then you put more stress on it, and it actually shuts down the thyroid that much more. So especially if you have an autoimmune condition, you've got to be very careful with it. So it was not a trick question.
I'm stressed out there myself.
I just ruined your thyroid for the day. So yeah, you mentioned zinc, selenium, iodine. These are all really important parts. One of the reasons why we started iodizing our salt is because people had goiters. And one of the things that you'll find in the areas where you have granite in the soil, like the Rocky Mountains, is you're not going to have a lot of naturally occurring iodine. And so, the farther people go away from the ocean, the more iodine depleted we get. And that's one of the reasons why Neanderthals did not make it and the Homo sapiens did, because they didn't have the capacity in their thyroid gland to go without iodine the same way that we did, the Homo sapiens. So kind of an interesting little anthropology lesson there about the importance of the thyroid. But if you think about some of the foods, fish, like wild caught fish, are some of the best sources of iodine that you can have. Not only that, but the fatty acids in there are great for the thyroid. And, if we look at fish, what percentage of fish would you say is contaminated right now? And how can people find a good source of wild caught fish that you found, John?
That's a good question. See, you're tricking me again. There are sites out there, and you might have this, or Annie might have this, we can put up there and list that actually will go through which fish you should avoid more, that have higher aspect, whether it's mercury, the bottom feeders, finding. It used to be everybody said, well, get wild fish. And there's actually some studies saying, well, sometimes the farm fish is actually healthy now that they're grown in healthier environments and not given hormones and not exposed to a lot of the things that the wild caught. So there are some debates there, but we should probably see if we get some links up that actually list, because it constantly changes which ones are recommended, plus which fish are sustainable, not being overfished. Yep. So I'll make a note to get some links for that.
The Environmental Working Group, EWG.org, is a really good place for you guys to go.
A lot of good stuff.
Learn about any of these things. So fish is a good one. Coconut oil. One of the things that we love getting our patients on who have thyroid issues is coconut oil. The medium chain triglycerides promotes healthy metabolism. The lauric acid, because the gut is a big issue, and lauric acid can kill some of those microbes that we don't want. So coconut oil. And you can use that in all ways. You can put it on your skin. You can put it in your coffee. How do you like coconut oil? Do you cook your vegetables in it, or how do you use it, John?
Oh, I thought you were looking at Annalise. She's nodding. I was like,
Annalise, how about you? We can go. Wait, yeah, I don't want to leave Annalise out of this conversation. Sorry. Oh, you're on mute.
Here we go. Okay. I eat a lot of coconut oil, and I actually really like the way it gives like my vegetables a taste. I actually had a question regarding back to minerals. Are you familiar with, or I guess I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Do you think that different nutrients and minerals are absorbed into your body differently depending on the food that you eat? So like zinc, for example, most zinc is found in like meat and poultry. Is the zinc that you consume in the meat absorbed into your bloodstream different than the zinc that's consumed in a type of vegetable? Is there a difference in the mineral itself? I was just curious because I read something about it a few times and I wasn't super sure how true it was.
Yeah, and I've looked into this somewhat, but actually, zinc and copper, you need to have the right ingredients with it. And if you can if you can break down the vegetables, if you actually chew the vegetables really good or lightly cook your vegetables, you've got a higher probability of getting the zinc out of those. Some meats, meats tend to be a little easier to absorb some of these, kind of raw material or micronutrients from. But once again, it depends on the quality of the meat and it depends on the quality of your digestion. So sorry, there's not a cut and dried answer. I think the answer is how well is your digestive system equipped to handle that?
Awesome, that's helpful. Thank you.
Great question, Annalise. And one of the things that Reagan and East West Health are so good about is noticing sometimes you need to test, because it's easy to say, oh, I'm going to eat the foods that have these things, and we should, because they're going to absorb better as a food than as a supplement. But there are times when you might be low in those nutrients, no matter what you've been taking. That could be because you're not absorbing it. And when you get the gut health, as we've talked about, unfortunately, the other reason is that a lot of the food sources we have today, the soil's been very depleted. And so you don't always have the nutrients in those foods that you think you're getting. And so sometimes, especially let's say you're dealing with a thyroid issue, it might be important to supplement. If you're low in a certain mineral, there are times when supplements have their place to help you, achieve optimization. And that can help with testing and getting the right supplements as well.
Yeah. And I mean, just since we're on the zinc thread, I mean, beef, lamb, these are some great, make sure it's grass-fed beef and lamb. Pumpkin seeds are like I love pumpkin seeds. Since we're kind of pumpkin season, everybody can get that. I don't know of a better source of zinc than pumpkin seeds. Lentils, quinoa, even turkey. We got Thanksgiving coming up. So if you're going to do turkey, it's not my favorite meat, but I'll eat a little bit because there's zinc in it. And then some garbanzo beans are another good source of zinc. So yeah, awesome. All right, some other things. Seaweed. Do you guys like seaweed?
Kelp and seaweed.
Kelp and seaweed are another.
Iodine. Zinc too, right?
Just awesome there. Even some type of probiotics like kefir. If you like kefir, there's a lot of good. Coconut kefir is one of my favorites. And then you can do some sprouted seeds, sprouted flax. Hemp has some good properties for thyroid function. There's a type of omega-3 fatty acids that's really critical for your thyroid. So those are some good things. And then one thing that I find that goes overlooked is the water that we're drinking. So there's a study that was done, I believe it was in 2018. And what they found is they measured TSH levels in individuals before drinking tap water and after. They had them all on spring water, and then half the group drank tap water for a week, the other half didn't. And they measured their TSA levels, and they found that just by drinking fluorinated tap water for a week, their TSH levels went up. So their that means their thyroid actually needed to call on the brain to produce more thyroid hormone. So their thyroid hormone dropped from drinking fluorinated water. So just getting a good water source is critical. And especially if you live in Park City, there are some areas of Park City where we're still trying to get rid of some of the environmental aspects and impacts from the mining of the past that was done there. So,
right. I mean, this kind of jumps into another aspect of stress that we have. Environmental exposures today are super high. And what Reagan was referring to with, let's say, the fluoride, and again, this can bring up a lot of debatable issues depending who you speak with, but things like bromine and chlorine and fluorine, they're going to interrupt iodine. And your body is going to absorb them. It's not going to absorb the iodine as well, which means they can kind of interrupt and disrupt your whole endocrine system. And like Reagan said, we've had patients who literally moved down. I remember we had patients who came from Southern Utah. I can't remember which town. Within a week of being there, they ended up going to their doctors. They were exhausted, fatigued. So, you've got hypothyroid. And he said, I think finally I went to a different doctor, functional medicine doctor. And he said, you're too healthy. Something's going on. Realized it was the water. Within a week of getting their filter changed, all their thyroid systems, all their thyroid labs normalized. So it really, it's amazing to think it can have that much of an impact that quickly. So, just speaking of foods though, just because it was Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts, great source of selenium. 2 Brazil nuts a day can give you enough selenium. Again, a critical mineral for being able to convert your inactive thyroid to your active thyroid. So, and if you look at any thyroid supplements, they have it in it. But again, the foods are better if you can get it in the food. So Brazil nuts, a great source for selenium.
Love Brazil nuts. Yeah, great antioxidant there. Yeah, interesting. On the water, go to ewg.org and plug in your zip code, and it will tell you how many contaminants there are in your water. My zip code there is 130. Arsenic was one of the highest. So, so if you're not motivated by our kind of anecdotal discussion and kind of one study, well, just go to EWG and you'll find that our water, we're not going to get giardia from it or sick, but man, there's some long-term environmental impacts that we need to address in our water, and so by getting zinc, by getting selenium, these are great things that can mitigate it. What else has selenium in it? I know Brazil nuts are my favorite. I know fish has a lot of selenium.
Fish has selenium.
Core meats. I come from a cattle farm. I grew up on a beef farm, so beef has selenium in it. But those are kind of the core things. But I think maybe if there's some vegetables, I know that would be kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, tuna, sardines, salmon. All right.
Annalise is on.
All right. I found that 1 cup of lentils boiled and cooked has 6 micrograms per serving.
Of selenium.
Yeah, and that's 11% of your daily amount.
Okay, so you're going to have to add some Brazil nuts to that, or lentils, and then you're going to be really gassy. So don't go to Thanksgiving dinner after that.
While we're talking about the endocrine disruptors too, Reagan, you should, I know you explained very well cooking certain foods, especially when you have a thyroid disorder.
Yeah, and so some of the foods that you want to avoid eating raw are like your cabbages, your kale, your mustard green, collard greens. I had a patient once who we were putting on a liver cleanse so that we could get her liver converting that T4 to T3 better. And she ended up, I said, 1 to 2 pounds of vegetables a day. And she missed the part where I said, you want to be cooking your vegetables so you can digest it better. And she was doing raw bok choy and raw kale every day, and it completely caused her to grow goiters after about 90 days. And so we got her cooking her vegetables again. The goiters went away, but it's very serious. These are goitrogenic foods. So goitrogens are part of the xenoestrogen families, and they can really disrupt the way that your thyroid functions. Birth control is another thing that can really impact your thyroid function as well. So if you are on birth control, Dr. Lawrence and I we advocate big families, just have some babies. All right, that's a joke. No, but yeah, Annalise is like, get this guy off. Yeah, but yeah, birth control can be a big deal. So making sure you're keeping those estrogens flushed out can be a really critical piece. But the foods that are going to disrupt the thyroid the most. So if you think about your thyroid, some of the core ingredients that you need are going to be the very things that these foods block. But the number one is going to be any foods that contain artificial colors, artificial sweeteners. If you look at some of the studies, like now there's certain artificial colors that are banned from children's food because they're neurotoxic. So they cause inflammation in the brain. Sugar is a big issue because not only does the sugar disrupt your insulin levels, which can affect your thyroid, but sugar also causes inflammation and leaky gut. So sugar is a big one. Gluten. I know some of you are probably rolling your eyes like, oh, here it comes. We're going to be talking about gluten again because it's gotten a real bad rap. But It's called molecular mimicry. Your body sees these gluten proteins, these gliadins, and it perceives them as a threat. And so it activates antibodies in your thyroid, and your thyroid gland starts getting attacked by your immune system. So gluten can be one of those foods that if you do have thyroid issues, you're going to have to go gluten-free. And this is, unfortunately, we find it works across the board for our patients who have thyroid issues, especially if your antibodies are elevated. Casein.
Yeah, the leaky gut syndrome. Oh, sorry, Reagan, just backing up to the leaky gut. So I think that's something people hear a lot. You hear this in the news, you hear, oh, leaky gut, and people, what is it? So if you think about, I think it's really important to understand that when the foods we eat are still considered, as they go through our digestive system, we're still kind of considered on the outside of your body. They're not actually taken into your body yet while they're in your intestines. So your intestines have this one cell layer, what are called tight gap junctions. They're designed as part of your immune system. It's one of the biggest parts of your immune system. And that decides what actually gets inside your body and what's not allowed in. So as long as those gap junctions are tight and your immune system's working, your body can recognize, oh, that's safe to bring in, that's no problem. Once there's inflammation, when you eat certain foods that trigger inflammation in your gut, that can cause swelling, and that allows those gap junctions to stretch out, and that's what gluten can do. If your immune system is lowered by, let's say, having low thyroid, that can also affect those gap junctions. What happens then, and this is what we've talked about, leaky gut, think processed food that shouldn't get through actually gets through. And so all of a sudden your body's going, whoa, what are those? We don't recognize those. That's foreign. That's not good. So you get all these, kind of antibodies attacking all these foreign things that normally shouldn't be allowed through. And then your body goes into overdrive. Once you have too much of that, once you have this leaky gut, you got all these extra antibodies that Reagan was talking about. And those then start attacking certain areas of your body, the thyroid being one of the biggest. And that's where they're realizing we've had this huge increase in Hashimoto's and autoimmune disease in your thyroid or Graves' disease. They're also realizing that can affect your heart, can affect your brain. So this whole, when you hear leaky gut, that's what's referring to. That's what's triggering the gut to leak and how it affects your body. And that's why it's really important to reverse it as well. And we can go into that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, no. I know sometimes we talk terms around. I'm not always sure who gets it or how it affects the thyroid.
No, it's so important. And gluten can be one of those causative factors, alcohol, sugar, casein. I mean, these are all some of the big contributing factors. Even peanuts, they have the aflatoxin in there. Peanuts can actually trigger some leaky gut, autoimmunity. And then anything that's refined, your plant oils, if you're cooking with vegetable oil, that's risky. That can be pro-inflammatory and cause some leaky gut as well. So those are some of the main foods. But, interestingly enough, if you cook these vegetables like your mustard green, collard greens, your kale, your chard, your broccoli, your cauliflower, I mean, these things are great for you. And I'm seeing that they're easy to find everywhere. And they have this substance called DIM, and DIM helps you metabolize and get rid of excess estrogens, because part of what you want your body to do is utilize the estrogens and then metabolize those and get them out. If your liver is too overwhelmed and you can't metabolize the estrogens, then your body just ends up recirculating those, and those become very toxic and they can block thyroid production. So those are some interesting things there as far as, foods to avoid. Some of the foods you want to get iron-rich foods. I find a lot of our thyroid patients have either some type of anemia, some type of blood issue. So heme iron, that's going to be found in the animal products. And then the non-heme iron is found in some plant foods. And so there's actually, there's a lot. You can get, beef, chicken liver. There's actually the ancestral meat. For those of you who have ever been to natural grocers, they have bison with heart and liver all combined. So if you have issues with your blood and you're not vegetarian, that's a great source for you. Oysters, clams, tuna, these are some great ways. Now, John, what's some non-heme foods that you think are important for people to get if they're vegetarian or more plant-based?
Right. So I'm mostly plant-based. I guess now we've termed everything. So I do eat fish occasionally. When you mentioned the iron, and that's, that certainly has been important with patients with low low thyroid, that and thiamine B1 can be really critical to sometimes turning people around quickly. And that's a hard one to supplement. You know, spinach is the one people think of. You know, if you get spinach, which should be cooked as well, especially if you have a thyroid disorder, you know, they'll say licorice, cook with iron pots to absorb it. Again, a micronutrient, but that's typically the one that comes to mind. Yeah, the peas, the high pea protein, no protein. Yeah, I wasn't thinking iron questions today.
Oh, no worries. Cashews are a good one that we share with our patients. Hazelnuts are a great non-heme iron source. I love beets. You love beets too. I see beets all the time. And by the way, the world's
good.
like
Great energy.
What's that? Oh, sorry.
Beets good for detox.
Oh yeah, detox. Yeah, the betaine in the beets is so good for your liver and for detoxification. So, and Dr. Lawrence is a phenomenal cook. If you guys, you know, I think he's impressive. So he knows his foods. All right. Well, I know we're coming up on our time. Do we have any questions that anyone's got?
Stress. We should probably address what we can do about stress. I know that's you know, the things are out there. We talk about how stress affects the thyroid. What are you supposed to do over the holidays to deal with it? It's not an easy answer. Certainly, when we talked about foods in the holidays, being disciplined. We're gonna have another webinar. We're gonna talk about kind of immune system and foods, but you know, being careful about which foods you eat. And you know, usually I tell people, okay, just give yourself you know, smaller portions. Try to be disciplined. But when it comes to stress, and you know, I wasn't being flippant earlier. I know all of us this year have dealt with it in one way or another. We're facing it with the holidays. And this is when you get into more of the wellness aspect of how we can either try meditation, going for a walk, exercise, taking a deep breath, learning how to control it, having purpose or intent, giving somebody a hug, you know, oxytocin, being kind to yourself, kind to other people. We all need that right now.
Yeah.
But I would say, you know, they're all important, but big fan of meditation starting the day. And people ask, how do you do that? There's a lot of apps out there, the Headspace, the Insight Timer. Sometimes it's just going for a walk and not thinking about everything else that affects us right now, letting things dissipate. It's, you know, obviously that's, you know, stress can be much deeper than that. And there's difficult areas, but if we can learn to not let it affect us as much, the stress doesn't have to go away, but we can address how it affects us. And that's right. The work does get put on you. There's no magical pills that really are great. Getting sleep is key. It's one of them, you know, I've heard some hormone experts talk about, we can talk all day about all these different foods and all the hormones and all the things you can do. If you're not getting enough sleep, doesn't matter. So critical to your health.
Yeah. I think my biggest stress release, and I know you feel the same, is exercise. You know, we get out on our mountain bikes, or your road bike occasionally as well.
I fall off a lot. Right?
Yes. I mean, it's just like, you know, I can't live without exercise. And so I think that's most critical. You know, put your own health number one. Make sure you're exercising every day. And, you know, one of the things you can do to avoid overeating during the holidays, drink a glass of water before your meal and then a glass of water after your meal. You'll be surprised that, you know, you'll just not quite want to overeat. So we did have a couple questions come in. And hello, Megan. Megan asks, is there a difference in refined sugar versus natural sugar, like from fruit, and the effect on thyroid and gut health? So that's a phenomenal question. You want to take that one on, John, or you want me to take a swing at it?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? You've got a better answer than I do on this one.
I don't know about that, but so here's the thing, Megan. 25 grams of fructose is kind of like 25 to maybe 30 or 40, depending on how active you are. And so if you're taking in refined sugar, like let's just use high fructose corn syrup for an example, your body is not adapt enough to be able to tolerate that type of sugar. Whereas if you're chewing on a sugar cane, it's going to be easier to absorb, easier to digest. Or if you're getting sugar from a fruit, there's a certain time of day when your body tends to be more sensitive to sugar and tolerates it better. And that's usually later on in the afternoon or evening. If you do it first thing in the morning, when your cortisol levels are high, you may cause a little bit more of an insulin resistance. So some of the sweeteners, I would not recommend, you know, if you're going to eat fruit, 2 apples a day, you know, a cup of blueberries, that's going to be a half a cup is going to be about maximum. You just don't want to exceed 25 grams of fructose. Otherwise, you'll start getting some leaky gut, and it can feed certain microbes in your body. But the other thing you can do, if you like things that are sweet, like I do, monk fruit is phenomenal. Stevia is another safe, you know, it's a natural sweetener, but it's not going to do anything to your blood sugar. Those things are awesome. So hopefully that helps. So sugar causes leaky gut, and then that leaky gut can cause an effect of your antibodies to attack your thyroid. So anything I've left out there?
No, I mean, I know if we look at one diet that can get recommended when people have leaky gut, when you're dealing with gut issues with thyroid, is a GAPS type diet, which will recommend having your cooked vegetables together with, let's say, if you're a meat eater, and then separate from your fruits. And this has more to do with some of the sugar imbalances, but those sugar imbalances that we're talking about, you know, can lead to the insulin and have direct impact on your thyroid. So yeah, you know, balancing the amount of sugar. And again, this is so much more important when you're somebody who's out of balance. If you're having thyroid issues, if you're having gut issues, so much more important to get it under control. Then you can slowly add them back in and have a little bit. It might not affect you as much. You know, I think sometimes you have to realize, wait, you know, how strict you have to be. And there's certainly some hormone experts like Dr. Myers, who has an autoimmune book. Which, you know, if you have an autoimmune thyroid disorder, you should never eat gluten. You should never eat sugar. You know, it's so there can be some strictness depending on where you are in your own health.
Yeah. Yep. Good point. And then Rai Wong. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Rai Wong. Is coconut water good for hyperthyroidism? So an overactive thyroid. Yeah, I think coconut water could be fine for it, but sometimes the coconut water has a lot of sugar in it. So you just got to be careful. Make sure that it's not spiked with even more sugar as well. What would you say on that, John?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, the electrolytes can be good for people who need to be, you know, easy to absorb. So, you know, the electrolytes can help the body, but probably the sugars were the only thing I was thinking of as well, depending on the, you know, what kind of source you're getting. It's one I actually haven't. Yeah. Back to you. I think that's the best answer I can come up with.
Yeah, I think just look at the sugar content. If you're doing too much, 25 grams of fructose is your limit, and there will be some fructose in the coconut water. I like doing all the fats in the coconut, and the coconut water just has all the fats removed. So that's the big issue that you want to look out for, and don't just start guzzling it, but it's a great way to get rehydrated. So phenomenal. Awesome. Let's see. Any other questions coming in? All right, Annalise, what have we not covered that you think would be important for everyone today?
Off the top of my head, this is just something that I was thinking about when you were talking about exercise and relieving stress to balance your hormones. How do you feel about like using one of these hooks, which are pretty popular now, or like a foam roller to release stress? And I guess I'm just curious as how that could affect your body to balance your hormones out.
Yeah, those things are great. You know, as an acupuncturist, that's what we're doing all day. We're sticking needles in stress spots and just like diffusing it. So one of the things that happens is you activate your parasympathetic nervous system when you use the stress balls, the foam roller. Obviously, there's a high threshold of pain. And so you get this little shot of epinephrine and norepinephrine, and you're like, oh, that's the spot. But then your body kicks in endorphins, and those endorphins allow your parasympathetic nervous system to kick in, and then you go into a deeper state of relaxation. So I think it's great. Yoga is one of the best exercises you can do, like the yin yoga when you've got thyroid issues. Even some light Pilates can be really, really great. I mean, just some lighter exercises, going for a walk. In Japan, they call it forest bathing. So getting out into the trees around all those negative ions, getting into nature is a great way. So exercise for stress release, yes, I think that's you know, if you're hanging out and if you have a job around a computer, those foam rollers, or what do you call that device you have there, Annalise? That's
I don't know. It's like this hook. I got it online at REI, but basically you just kind of go like this.
Yeah.
I do this all day because I tend to hold stress in my shoulders. So it's just something that I found that helped me, and I've done a little bit of research on it, but
that's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, we've had some neurologists that promote those, almost prescribe them, how great they can be for just headaches and that chronic stress feeling and how it can, you know, relieve it. So big fan. The other, I'm going to jump just because you mentioned exercise again. And I get speaking fast sometimes. I know I mentioned how you can, you know, sometimes when you are stressed all the time and you know, I mentioned that exercise can, people notice they're actually gaining weight. How can this be? And so when you're in that chronic stress phase, we can get into what's called adrenal depression. This gets into why it's so important to test and find out what's going on, which is something, you know, they do it at East West Health so well. Because if your adrenals are tapped out, one of the symptoms you might have is, you know, you go and work out hard and then you're just exhausted and you can't get up the next day. When your adrenals are totally fatigued, that's going to directly affect your thyroid. And in those cases, so if you get tested, you say, oh, your adrenals are fatigued, it really is important to almost back off exercise. I'm not saying not do it, but it might be, hey, you know what, for a week or so, you might want to just go for a walk and see how you feel. You might just do some gentle yoga, some stretching. And once you can build up, you know, but you really sometimes have to back off and let your body recover. Yeah. I think a lot of, you know, especially here in Park City and Utah, we're an active community. You just want to push through everything, or you can't, you know, it's, you know, you can't stop. Everybody's on the go. And there's times when you have to almost back off a little bit and let your body heal first for you to then be able to really fully heal. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Don't push it too hard. And so one of the things that I think is a critical place, and for those of you who want to take your health to the next level, very first thing is get your labs ran, make sure you get a comprehensive thyroid panel. It's a really good place. And then you can kind of gauge exercise and look at exercise as medicine. And that's where we really, you know, and Dr. Lawrence and I and the whole team, this is where we give our patients guidance on what exercises are best based on what the labs reveal. So yeah, really, I think some important things there. Same with food, same with, you know, what we've talked about today gives you some general overview, but yeah, there's always another layer of information that we're after when it comes to functional medicine. So yeah. What else, Annalise, did we miss that you'd like to learn about?
We covered so much good content. I'm thinking now back to water, and what kind of filtered water, I guess, do you recommend? Like there's high pH water, or just the, I don't remember the name. There's a certain filter you could buy.
Reverse osmosis.
Reverse osmosis. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, I guess in Utah, a lot of us live here. What kind of filter do you think is best to get for your water, or what type of water should you seek out with the lack of nutrients in our water here?
Now this is a question I get asked all the time, and there's even you can look at, like, even using a Brita filter, you know, for example, is going to be much better than no filter. Reverse osmosis, obviously you're taking everything out. You just want to make sure you're putting minerals back into your water, I think is a critical thing. We have a whole house filter. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the name of it, but it really, you know, it depends on how much money you want to invest in a water filter. So if you want to invest $50, get a Brita. That's like, you can get those anywhere. If you really want to go for it, you can spend a couple $1,000s and get a big, you know, that's a big stack is what our filter looks like. And then the water goes through this activated charcoal process and all the toxins get removed and contaminants. And that is the ideal way to go. I just don't remember. There's a lot of different brands out there. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite, John?
No, we have the same thing. We have a whole house filter. That way, when you're in the shower, the steam, you can get a lot of chlorine and different chemicals from the steam. You can be inhaling it. They've done a lot of studies. That's actually can be almost worse than drinking it sometimes. So we have a whole house filter. And then, you know, for what we drink, we have a filter on the fridge, but also a reverse osmosis with remineralizer that we, you know, use for drinking water typically. And the reverse osmosis one I had was an Aquasana. They're really great. They can just send you the replace the filters when you need. They also do whole house filters, but there's a bunch of different companies out there, and there's certainly a range of costs.
Awesome. Thank you both. That really helps me out. I've been looking to get one. Just a side note, as we're relating it back to food and holiday foods, how we can treat our bodies really well during this season. A really good combination of foods, that some of them that we mentioned earlier, are pumpkin seeds with butternut squash. So kind of using that combination to make a dish could be really tasty, and we would get our good zinc that we need. So
love it.
Yes. And vitamin A, which is great for protecting your lungs right now during the season of colds and respiratory illnesses. So more good things in there.
Awesome.
Great. Does anyone have any last minute questions before we end things here today? Looks like we have just one more minute left.
Annalise and Eats, thank you so much for having us, and thank you, Reagan, for joining and all your expertise. As I mentioned, Reagan and his clinics, East West Health, are phenomenal for doing a deep dive into the root cause and taking so much time to figure each patient out differently. You know, it's not just always looking at labs. You really have to get to know the patients and understand them. So highly recommend, if you're having any thyroid issues, they're an amazing resource here in Utah.
Yes, and one of the things we wanted to do, I appreciate the opportunity to be on. Hopefully you guys learned something. And the ones who want to take things deeper, one of the things that we're offering is $47 consultations. So just let people know you've heard from us on Park City Eats. And as our gift to Park City Eats and Annalise, we've got that discount for you for a consultation, and then we can run a deep dive on your labs and see where you're at. So if that's helpful, you can call the office, go to acueastwest.com, or call the office at 435-653-1353. I think that's our phone number there. Sorry, I'm not 100% certain.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was so great to have you both on here today. You both have such a wealth of knowledge, and I'm just excited you're willing to share that with our community. I have recorded this webinar, and I will be sending it out to all of the participants that registered, in addition to one lucky person that I'll pull out of a hat who will win a gift card to Hearth and Hill. So yeah, so
my book. Reagan said my book was called Doctor. It's actually called Playing Doctor.
Yes,
Playing Doctor.
It's I started medical school with some head injuries, falling off the bike a few too many times, and waking up in the neuro ward right before med school started. So I had more entertaining stories in there. People want to see what it's like to go through medical school with a different view. So
yeah, I was laughing out loud reading it. It's a really good book. So make sure you guys get it, and leave John a review on Amazon too, because he's got 3 more coming up. So
3 more coming out. Yep. Editing them now.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
All right,
everybody.
thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.